Have you ever wondered if there is something deeper behind the story of Genesis? Something that few notice, yet it can completely change your view of who you are? What if I told you that the Bible reveals not just one, but two human creations, and that this directly impacts your purpose, your identity, and your destiny? In this video, you will uncover the hidden mystery of two types of humans created by God, Elohim and Yahweh, and how this sacred duality lives within you now. Ready to understand your vocation, your inner calling, and the formation process God has for your soul? Stay until the end and see how this revelation can transform your walk with God and your search for meaning in life. What if everything you thought you knew about the creation of humanity was incomplete? What if the book of Genesis, right in its first verses, hides a secret so profound that it could redefine how you understand your origin, your calling, and even the purpose of your being? At first glance, it seems like just an ancient story about the world's beginning. But those who look with spiritual eyes realize there is something there, something that changes everything. At the beginning, there are two accounts. One speaks of Elohim creating humans in his image and likeness, majestically, cosmically, almost like an explosion of light and purpose. The other shows Yahweh shaping with his hands from dust, creating not just a body, but a soul in process, subject to fall, sin, but also to redemption. It's as if we are dealing with not one creation, but two lineages, one made of light, the other of clay, and both carrying an archetypal mystery. But if this is true, what does it say about you? About who you really are? Perhaps your inner struggle between spirit and flesh is not weakness, but evidence. Evidence that you carry within you this sacred duality. And if that sounds intriguing, just wait until we look at the first creation, the one that was spoken before being shaped. Imagine a God who doesn't need to touch the clay to create. He simply speaks, and everything lights up. Elohim, the transcendent creator, declares, "Let us make mankind in our image, after our likeness." And so, a humanity made of light, of spiritual essence, marked by a divine identity, is sent out with a cosmic purpose, to rule, multiply, and reflect God's own glory in the world. These first beings were not formed by hands, they were spoken into existence by the Word. They appear in the plural, man and woman, at the same time. No fall, no Eden, no trial. Only a clear commission to fill the earth with God's image and spirit. This raises a bold question. What if there was a humanity before Adam, not carnal, but spiritual? A lineage that did not fall, but left spreading through the invisible world and maybe even among us. What if part of the emptiness we feel, this inner call that unsettles us, is the echo of that first creation? The longing for a lost identity? But hold on, because while these first humans were spoken, there are others who were shaped. And what happens when the word meets the dust? Now, the scene changes. The God who once spoke from on high now stoops to the earth. Yahweh Elohim, the Lord God, does not just declare, he touches. He forms Adam from the dust with his own hands and breathes spirit into his nostrils. Here, there is no crowd created at once, but a single man, carefully molded. This is not mass creation, it's intimate formation. And that changes everything. Unlike the first humanity of Genesis 1, here we see flesh, fragility, testing. Adam is placed in the Garden of Eden, not as king of nations, but as guardian of a sacred space. And Eve? She does not come from clay, but from his side, his rib, a profound image of partnership and covenant, not hierarchy. Yahweh is closer, more relational, almost familiar. This is the God who walks in the garden and asks questions. Have you noticed that most of our struggles happen in gardens like this? Beautiful environments, but full of tough decisions. Relationships, vocation, spiritual identity, all tested in silence. What if Eden is more than a historical place? What if it is a spiritual process we all go through? But wait, because it is in this fertile ground that a shadow begins to emerge. Cain walks with blood on his hands and fear in his eyes. After the fall, he does not just flee God's presence. He fears being killed by others. But others who? Who existed beyond his immediate family? This question echoes in the Old Testament like a muffled thunder. Where did Cain's wife come from? With whom did he build a city? Genesis seems to whisper something many have never heard. What if Cain was not just running from divine justice, but also colliding with a humanity that already walked the earth? A spiritual lineage created by Elohim before the fall, scattered, free, but forgotten in modern writings. Cain could be more than a murderer, perhaps a link between two worlds, between those molded from the earth and those breathed from the light. At this point, the Bible stops being just narrative and becomes an open question. What if you are also living between two lineages? One that pulls you toward divine purpose, and another that screams survival, instinct, fear? Cain's mark, in this sense, might be more than punishment. It could be identity. It could be protection. But this leads us to an even greater revelation: the mystery behind the two names of God. Have you noticed how, in Genesis, God appears with two different names? Elohim and Yahweh are not just random titles. They are profound revelations about divine nature and, by extension, our own spiritual identity. Elohim, the majestic God, creator of the cosmos, who speaks and all is formed. Yahweh, the near God, who shapes with hands, who breathes life into man's soul. This sacred duality reflects the tension between spirit and flesh, light and dust, transcendence and immanence. In Kabbalah and other mystical traditions, this is seen as the balance between the infinite and the personal, the divine who creates from afar, and the God who walks the Garden of Eden beside us. The Bible does not hide this tension. It celebrates it, for it holds the key to understanding our human nature and divine purpose. Imagine this in your life. There are days you feel Elohim, made in image and likeness, full of light and purpose. Other days, Yahweh feels closer, reminding you that we are also dust, fragile, struggling. This duality is not contradiction. It is the dance of our soul, a call to recognize we were formed for a continuous process of transformation. Between fall and redemption, have you ever thought that Adam and Eve were not created to be perfect, but as prototypes of humanity in formation? Adam, whose root Adama means earth, represents our human nature linked to dust, flesh, and limitations. Eve, life and giver of life, symbolizes partnership, soul, the complement God designed for us to walk this path of learning and transformation together. They were placed in the Garden of Eden not to rule authoritatively, but to care, form, and grow. The garden is more than a physical place. It is a spiritual space of trial and formation, where free will is essential, and where the choice between light and shadow begins to define our destiny. This is not just a story. It's the archetype of our own human journey, where the inner calling mixes with the daily struggle. You, like them, carry this duality, this divine tension that drives the search for spiritual identity and life purpose. The narrative of Adam and Eve teaches us that we were not made for stagnation, but for the continuous process of breaking and restoration, where God's forgiveness opens the way for redemption and true communion with Him. Have you noticed how the story of Adam and Eve doesn't end at the fall, but a deep process of redemption begins there? Even after sin, God does not abandon them. On the contrary, He covers their flaws, clothes their wounds, and sends them with a divine purpose for life. This is an invitation to understand that our own human journey is a continuous formation process, where grace and forgiveness walk side by side with free will. This transformation does not happen overnight. It is a journey where our breaks become fertile soil for inner light to bloom. Practically, this means every mistake, every fall, can be an opportunity to cultivate faith in the pain, driving us to seek communion with God even in the hardest moments. Thus, the destiny that seemed sealed by sin can become the path to true vocation. And if you think this is just a distant theory, think of how many people around you have transformed their lives after hitting rock bottom and finding a renewed inner calling. The secret lies in the willingness to be molded by the divine process, because redemption is an invitation for all, not an exclusive for a few. Have you thought that Genesis is not just a creation story, but a profound revelation about human nature? Between light and dust, spirit and flesh, this ancient narrative speaks directly about our spiritual identity, showing that sacred duality dwells within each of us. The Bible invites us to see beyond the surface and fun stando, that our divine purpose is found between these tensions. Practically, this means recognizing that pain, doubts, and even falls are not mere obstacles, but essential parts of our formation process. When we accept this inner struggle, we begin to walk with God, even without all the answers, cultivating a faith strengthened by adversity that drives us to rediscover our true vocation. And if this story seems complex, hold tight, because there are still more mysteries hidden in ancient texts, in the Torah, the Kabbalah, and even the Book of Enoch, which help us understand divine design and the tension guiding humanity's destiny. The journey is just beginning. Have you ever asked yourself what kind of human you really are? This question is deeper than it seems, because Genesis shows us we were not just created, but chosen to live between light and dust, spirit and flesh. This internal tension we feel is the inner call awakening our spiritual identity and challenging us to live a true life purpose. This reflection is not just theology, it's personal. It's like looking in the mirror and recognizing we are a reflection of two creations, the spiritual, which makes us eternal, and the physical, which makes us vulnerable. In daily life, this means you can embrace this sacred duality to find balance, facing doubts, and taking your choices with courage and faith in transformation. But wait, because this doesn't stop here. Understanding who you are in this context changes everything, from your vocation to your destiny. The question that remains is, are you willing to discover yourself as part of a new humanity, a remnant in communion with God? You carry within you the image of Elohim, were shaped by Yahweh's hands and redeemed by Christ's blood, a truth that defines your identity and your journey. This sacred tension inside you, between light and dust, spirit and flesh, is the reflection of the creation's duality that dwells in all of us, a sign that you were made by divine design for much more than just existing. The story that started in Genesis does not end there. It echoes in every choice, every moment of faith and pain, every step of the walk with God. This narrative is alive, and you are an active part of it, invited to walk with purpose, to turn your failures into fertile soil for a new humanity, to discover your vocation and live your calling with courage. So, reflect. How are you living this story? Are you accepting the challenge of your formation and transformation, or letting the dust of the past hold you back? Your spiritual journey is an invitation to break cycles, rediscover your identity, and build a legacy. If you want to continue this quest, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join this generation of seekers who read the Bible with open eyes. God bless.